car crashes, defective products, dangerous drugs, injuries, and abuse. Across the state of Alabama, the attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis, Wright, are here to serve you. Your tough legal questions answered by our experts with the attorneys of Hollis, Wright.
Alabama last year had the highest per capita bankruptcy filing rate with 323 of every 100,000. That is double the national average. Hello, I'm Art Franklin. Welcome to the attorneys. We are talking about bankruptcy, what it is, and how to handle it. Helping us handle this topic, we've got a special guest with us, but first from the Hollis Wright Law Firm, we got Michael Eldridge with us, but we've got the special guest with us. That beautiful smile is Gina McDonald. Gina, thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me. Look forward to it.
Yeah, so Michael, let's jump right into this.
Yeah, it's an important topic, like you said, not only nationwide, but especially in this state, just looking at those statistics. And it's an area of the law that even most lawyers aren't familiar with. It's a very specialized subsection of the law, has its own codes, has its own rules, has its own procedures. And while we all might have a concept of bankruptcy and what it means, what I've learned is that there's a lot more to it.
Absolutely.
And what your options are leading up to bankruptcy, if you end up having to file for bankruptcy, depends greatly on the circumstances, who your creditor are, what your debts are, what your circumstances are, and you need someone who knows that system that can look at your situation, your circumstances to determine that. And luckily we have one of those very people that knows that ins and outs. So let's just jump into it. You tell us, generally speaking, when we're talking about bankruptcy, everybody knows that we're talking about debts, and people are in situations where they cannot pay certain debts, sometimes companies. But generally, for our viewers, what are the types of bankruptcies and what are the types of situations that lead to a circumstance where someone's filing for bankruptcy?
Right. First of all, people that call my office, they're at the lowest of lows. So, we recognize that immediately. We'll get them in and we'll talk to them about the different types. Now, consumer bankruptcies, Chapter 7 and Chapter 13. Chapter 7 is a straight liquidation bankruptcy. That's the one that you mostly hear about because people are at the end of the rope. They can't afford to pay their unsecured debts any longer, their credit card bills, medical bills, and they need to just wipe the slate clean and get a fresh start and start over. It's often called fresh start bankruptcy. It's 90 days in and out. The other type of consumer bankruptcy is Chapter 13. That lasts for 3 to 5 years, and that's where we consolidate debts and put them together. And the person pays a payment every month over the next 3 to 5 years. The reasons you would go into a 7 versus a 13, there's lots of reasons, but I'll just start with a 7. A Chapter 7, if someone comes to me with a Chapter 7, they've never filed a Chapter 7 before, they don't have any real assets that I have to worry about that client losing in a bankruptcy. Sometimes a trustee can step in and take an asset, but I make sure they're not going to lose any assets, and then they don't make too much money. If they have a lot of junk debt, then a Chapter 7 is the way to go, wipe the slate clean. Chapter 13 is for more individuals who have gotten behind on a mortgage, maybe behind on a car. Maybe they filed a Chapter 7 a few years ago and they're not eligible for a 7 again because you have to have 8 years between a 7. Maybe they're behind on their rent or their credit card payments have gone so high that they can't afford the minimum payments anymore. So we'll bundle all those debts together, make one payment so that they pay that one payment every month for the next 3 to 5 years.
Gotcha. So it's almost just like a structured payment where we're looking at all the debts and we're having a payment plan, but we're just consolidating everything.
Correct.
Let me ask you this. I would assume that the majority of situations where people are getting to the point where they're calling someone like you are when those mortgage companies, those banks, those credit card companies start breathing down their throat. And I think you phrased it as the creditors, right? Does that change at all when you file bankruptcy, or do their efforts to get your money or garnish your wages or put you in default, does the bankruptcy speak to that, or are there certain rules for the creditors?
Absolutely, there are certain rules for the creditors. What happens when you file any type of bankruptcy, either a consumer or a business bankruptcy, something called the automatic stay goes into effect. The way I explain it to my clients is you kind of go into a bubble and it says stay back. All the creditors are outside of that bubble and they can't call my client, they can't collect money, they can't repo a vehicle. They are protected by federal law from any adverse action against them while that stay is intact and while they're in bankruptcy. So that's one of the best reasons for people. If they've got a car that's at risk of repo, let's get you into a case and get the protection while we reorganize everything. Or if you're facing a foreclosure tomorrow, let's get you into some type of case to get that protection. You know, a lot of people come to me that have garnishments. They've gotten a notice of a garnishment from their employer. Well, it's important to go ahead and look at, is it possible to get them into a case to stop that garnishment?
And what you mean by a garnishment, that's where a creditor's going to their employer and saying, hey, instead of paying them their paycheck, pay us because they owe us money.
That's right. Usually a creditor has gotten a judgment against someone and they've sent a notice to the employer saying, this employee owes me money. Can you please take 25% of their paycheck and send it to the court? And so we want to stop those things, because if someone's already having a hard time paying their bills and then they get their paycheck at the end of the week and it's 25% less, then they're in a world of hurt.
That's right.
So Gina, you talk about that bubble.
Mm-hmm.
So basically the creditors have to back off.
That's right.
But let's say that person is married. How does that impact their spouse?
Well, if the person if it's a single individual filing and they're married, they're actually in Chapter 13, say it's a joint debt. Husband and wife are both on the home, but only the gentleman files bankruptcy. There's something in Chapter 13 called the co-debtor stay. So even if the mortgage is behind and the wife is on the mortgage, they can't go after the wife in a Chapter 13. They're prevented from even trying to collect from her. Now that's different in a Chapter 7. If a Chapter 7 someone comes in and the husband files and the wife doesn't file and there's joint debt, the husband is protected, but in a 7 they could still continue to collect against the wife. Now, if I have a man come in to file a bankruptcy and his wife doesn't file and is not participating, her credit's not impacted if she's not on any of the debt with him. Her name's not on the petition, her social security number's not on the petition, nothing identifiable is on the petition. So it really has no impact to a spouse unless they have joint debt of some type.
And when circumstances come where a husband and a wife come to you, and let's say the husband is the person that's planning on filing for bankruptcy, and is one of the things that you evaluate in terms of what is the best route for them in terms of the bankruptcy process, whether or not they have those co-debts or they are co-debtors on certain things, and how important is that those things do be considered on the front end so that that your spouse is not affected?
Right. It is really important that we consider the whole picture. Normally what we'll do is pull a credit report, and from that credit report I can tell what debts have a co-applicant, and then usually the co-applicant's the spouse. For example, if I file a bankruptcy for someone that has tax debt and it's joint tax debt, the spouse is going to be affected in the long run by not being part of the case. Or if it's a car that's joint, the spouse may be affected. So a lot of times I'll recommend that they both file the case if necessary to make sure that everyone is protected. Now, if there's joint debt in a Chapter 7 and I file only on the gentleman and the wife owes the debt, there's not going to be any recourse. They can come after her. So I would make sure that I looked at that to make sure that there weren't going to be any negative impacts on the other spouse.
All right, we are shedding light on bankruptcy. We're going to put a pin in right there, helping you understand how to navigate your way through it if that's something that you have to face. We also want to remind you that you can get in contact with one of the attorneys at Hollis Wright right now. All you have to do is call 1-844-LAW-TALK. That number is 1-844-529-8255. The call is free, it's confidential, it's between you and the attorney that you're talking to. We're going to take a break. Talking bankruptcy on the attorneys. We'll continue after this.
I'm Josh Wright with the law firm of Hollis Wright, a personal injury law firm, and thank you for watching The Attorneys. We hope you, a friend, or a loved one never needs legal counsel for a case. But if you do, the goal of the show is simple: to provide answers and legal counsel when you need it the most. Your call to the show is free and off air. So if you have questions specific to the show or related to other accident or injury topics, call, email, or text us. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, or go to hollis-wright.com and click on the Contact Us button. We know your time is valuable, so thank you for spending it with us and watching The Attorneys.
The attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis, Wright, are here to serve you.
When we started the show in 2011, my goal was to do what our firm does best. Help people answer questions related to real-world legal issues they have in their lives in a way that's not intimidating to talk with a lawyer. If the issue is important to you, it's equally important to us, and we're ready to talk with you at no cost.
Yeah, oftentimes people are confronting various legal issues in their lives that really run the gamut of a lot of different legal practice areas such as bankruptcy, criminal law, civil law such as personal injury, divorces, domestic relations. And to be able to have a show once a week that covers those practice areas and answers people's questions in those areas, that's really the main objective of the show.
We use the resources of the many lawyers at our law firm to create a plan that has a lasting impact for each person that calls or texts. And we also give back to the community at the same time. We are here to serve you, the viewer, each week on The Attorneys.
You see us each Sunday night on The Attorneys, but remember, our attorneys are here all week long to help you with your personal injury claim.
Our attorneys are standing by right now to give you a free consultation at Hollis Wright. Your result matters.
And welcome back. This is The Attorneys, and we're discussing bankruptcy, what it is and how to handle it. Mike and Gina are the attorneys breaking it all down for us. And Gina, right now, is what everyone's thinking about this, the prime interest rate right now. That's just impacting us in so many ways. How does that impact bankruptcy?
You know, it impacts debtors tremendously. When we get our credit cards, when we fill that application out now online and we click the boxes, we agree to everything. Normally we're agreeing to a range of interest between 9.99, maybe 29.99. And so when you go out and you charge your credit card 2 years ago, maybe you ran it up to $10,000, your minimum payment a year ago may have been $150, $200. But as the prime interest rate goes up, as we've seen in the last year, how many points it's gone up, that credit card payment, the minimum payment goes up because the interest rate goes up. So therefore, somebody that was paying $200 a year ago may be paying $400 now. And so therefore, they can't pay their minimum payments, and so they'll call my office and I can't pay my credit card payments anymore. What do I do? We can consolidate that debt into a Chapter 13, or we can do a 7 to make it go away. But the prime interest rate also is having an impact on people who have second mortgages or like HELOC loans, because also, once again, people don't read the fine print, and those HELOC loans are tied to the prime. When prime interest rates go up, your interest on the HELOC loan goes up, and therefore they can't pay their HELOC loan either, which is a home equity line of credit, usually a second type mortgage on a home. So a lot of people are hurting right now with the debt that they took on several years ago, with us thinking the interest rates were going to stay where they were. I mean, everyone's optimistic that they were going to stay where they were, and now they're at 8.5% and probably going to go up another 0.25% next month. So it's real important for people to read those disclosures and be aware. And then if you have gotten to where you can't pay those minimum payments, to reach out to a bankruptcy attorney, at least find out what your options are.
Let me kind of piggybacking on that, and I don't know what effect, if any, it's had, but I know that when I went to law school, I took out student loans and quite a bit of student loans because even back then, way back then, school wasn't cheap. And the interest rates at that time were essentially zero, right? In the 2000s and 2010s, early 2010s. Has that had an effect on people who are now coming out of forbearance and with the interest rates going up?
It may not have had an effect on their interest rate because their interest rate was probably locked in. What has happened is, during COVID, student loans were in forbearance, government student loans were in forbearance, so no one was making a payment. And they were still spending that money on other things, right? So October 1, student loans came out of forbearance. Federal student loans came out of forbearance, and now people have these giant student loan debts that they didn't have for 3 years. And now they're making a choice. Do I pay my student loan of $500? Do I pay my rent or my power bill, or do I pay my credit card debt? So student loans, the effect of student loans on the economy and on the people I'm seeing right now is tremendous now that they're out of forbearance, because they're getting set up on payment plans which they may not be able to make.
A lot of people may be wondering this, and I always wondered this in terms of the idea of bankruptcy, and that is what effect it has for your future. And specifically, we all know that in terms of getting a mortgage in the future, or being able to get a business loan in the future, or being able to get a credit card in the future, you have to have credit. And that if you go through the bankruptcy process, how does that affect your future in terms of being able to get credit?
I get this question every day. So if someone comes into my office and they file a Chapter 7, the good news is they can't file a Chapter 7 for 8 years, right? So the good news is that you're a better credit risk the day after you file a bankruptcy.
Because the people loaning money know that you can't file for bankruptcy.
That's right. So typically I've been doing this for 22 years, so I've had repeat filers, people who I've filed bankruptcy for, have been able to go out and get car loans, new mortgages, and then they've come back to see me, 4 or 5 years down the road. So there is life after bankruptcy, and there's a good credit life after bankruptcy. You just have to be careful how you pick and choose it. I usually go over with my clients how to get back on the right track to getting good credit again. One excellent way is to really watch your credit report after your bankruptcy is over to make sure things are being accurately reported. And if you have student loan debt that you have to pay, it's the best debt to have for your credit report. If you're paying it, it's the worst debt if you're not paying it. I also tell people to get a share secured credit card so that go to the bank, give them $1,000. Credit Bureau doesn't know that you gave Regions Bank $1,000, but you use 20%, charge $200 a month, pay it off. Always look at your utilization and pay less than 20%. That's going to help build your credit score. And then sometimes you can just jump on a card with somebody else as an authorized user, and that will help you rebuild your credit. But I promise there is life after Chapter 7 and Chapter 13.
I'm sure there are a lot of people at home right now just breathing a sigh of relief just because of what you just said. And you're talking about getting back on track, Gina. What about just getting organized in the first place for bankruptcy? I would assume that takes some work as well.
It does, and sometimes that is the hardest part of my job, because we do ask for a lot of documents that are required by Congress for us to have in our file. Not necessarily documents that anybody other than my staff sees, but we're required to see 6 months worth of bank statements, 6 months worth of pay stubs. We're required to see 2 years worth of tax returns. We're driver's license, Social Security, car tags, boat tags, and then of course all your debt. So Congress does require that we see all that, and a lot of times it's sometimes when you get to the point where you need a bankruptcy attorney, you've buried your head and you've been so overwhelmed that you're just like, I can't even think about keeping this straight. And so they may have a pile of mail that they bring into my office they've not even opened, and we'll sort through it. It's easy for us to get people's tax returns. It's easy for people to get their pay stubs and bank statements, but we gather those documents together, put their case together, and we get them filed as soon as we can and get them protection, that bubble, that automatic stay that they need.
All right, educate me on this, because when I'm listening to sports talk radio and podcasts,
Well, I haven't.
there is always commercials advertising about credit counseling. What's the difference there? Is that a better way or a different way, or a substitute for bankruptcy, going to a credit counselor?
Well, that phrase is used frequently, and I just want to distinguish. There is credit counseling in bankruptcy, but it's literally, we have to get a certificate of credit counseling. I call it your ticket into bankruptcy, and it's very short and brief. And then there's a ticket out of bankruptcy that we have to get, and someone watches a DVD or a link and gives us some codes. That's been their credit counseling. I think the credit counseling you're referring to is maybe debt relief or debt consolidation. That's a touchy subject for me. I try not to say anything negative about anybody else, but the type of credit counseling that I see mostly is where they've taken people's money up front, $3,000 or $4,000, and they'll tell the client they can pay these bills for less than what you owe. And the problem with that is those creditors have to participate. So if you have 10 credit cards and you're paying $500 a month and thinking that they're building up money to settle each debt, which is what these agencies do, that doesn't stop Discover Bank from filing a lawsuit against you, because there's no protection, there's no federal automatic stay. So I oftentimes people come into my office, they're like, I was in debt renegotiation and I got sued by Discover. And I'm like, well, yeah, because you didn't have any federal protection, and those debt negotiators are not lawyers. They're not going to stand in for you in court. They're not going to help protect you in a state court action. So
when you're talking about federal protection, you're talking about literally the law. The law is there.
That's right. That's right.
You don't have those laws.
You don't have that, right. And they don't have lawyers that will go into a state court and defend you in an action there. So I'm not a big proponent of any of those programs because they don't offer federal protection.
Understood.
And they don't have the power of legal representation.
Absolutely right, sir.
Well, I know you're covering a lot of ground, but we are not through yet. We still have much more to cover on bankruptcy, how to handle it, navigate your way through it. That's why Gina is here and Mike as well as we continue here on the attorneys. But I also want to remind you, there's a QR code on your screen right now. Just take your phone out, scan that QR code. That'll get you right to Hollis Wright. You can ask a question there. You can also click on the social media platforms there and find out what's going on with Hollis Wright 24/7, 365, always listening to you. Stay with us. We're going to take a break, and we'll be back to continue our conversation on bankruptcy, how to handle it.
Thank you for watching The Attorneys each Sunday night, where we come to your living room to provide free legal advice in a confidential, off-air setting. Unfortunately, with the number of calls, texts, and emails that come in during the show, we can't always get to everything. But know this, Hollis Wright is open all week long. You call us at 844-LAW-TALK and we're going to answer your question for free. Thank you for watching The Attorneys, and we look forward to seeing you and talking to you soon.
Did you know when you have to take a case all the way to trial, there is almost always insurance involved? Don't take on large insurance companies on your own. Our attorneys are standing by right now to give you a free consultation. At Hollis Wright, your result matters.
And welcome back to The Attorneys. We are discussing bankruptcy, how to handle it, and we want to help you navigate this with some tools that we're getting from our attorneys, Mike and Gina here. And Gina, as viewers are at home watching this show, the question comes up, can my boss fire me if I file for bankruptcy?
I get that question a lot as well. Section 525 of the Federal Bankruptcy Code says that you can't be fired for filing a bankruptcy. Now, I also add, when I'm speaking with my clients, they can find another reason to fire you. That might not be because you filed bankruptcy, they may find another reason. But if the reason truly is because you filed bankruptcy, then you would have a tremendous lawsuit that you might want to come see Hollis Wright about if they do fire you for bankruptcy. But normally your employer doesn't even know you filed bankruptcy. There are attorneys in town that do payroll deduction for Chapter 13, so the employer is going to obviously know if you're getting your pay cut for a 13. I don't usually recommend that for my clients because I think the less your employer knows about your personal finances, the better off you'll be. But you know, it's not published anywhere. If someone they used to put it up at the post office, or it would be in the Shelby County Reporter. Bankruptcies aren't published per se in local newspapers anymore. I think you can find it on the internet if you're a sleuth and you can figure out things, but it's really not as a voodoo type, or not voodoo, taboo type word now, and more people than you can imagine file bankruptcy. And if everybody lost their job because they filed bankruptcy, we wouldn't have anybody working.
Right. So earlier you were talking about the difference between Chapter 7 and Chapter 13, and you touched on it a little bit, but essentially it's two different ways to discharge debts, to get rid of debts. And one, Chapter 7 you said was a clean sweep, and Chapter 13 you described as a reorganization.
Right.
There's different time periods for how long those last. I think you said
90 days.
90 days versus 3 to 5 years.
3 to 5 years, that's right.
At the end of those 90 days and at the end of those 3 to 5 years, what is left? Obviously, not everything is discharged in bankruptcy. Not every debt is getting rid of. What debts are you still faced with on the other side of bankruptcy?
In most Chapter 7s, the debts that you're left with would be the debts that you reaffirm on, debts you reobligate on, a car, a mortgage. Other debts that are non-dischargeable would be student loan debts are non-dischargeable, so you would still have that on the other side of a 7. If you had tax debt going into a 7, even though while you're in the case, the IRS or the state of Alabama can't collect against you, but once your discharge is entered, that debt still remains. Another type of debt that would remain after Chapter 7 would be any kind of domestic relations debt, child support, alimony, or some sort of property settlement.
Gotcha. I know a lot of times, and this is just from my practice, in terms of I talked to the mother someone that needs legal representation and they're nervous about coming and talking to me. And I've done what I've done for a decade, and that seems weird to me, but that's almost everyone, that they are nervous to go and talk to a lawyer. What would you say to the viewers that may be looking at this and that are nervous to go talk to someone like you about what the process looks like? Because I always find that once I let them know, like, this is what it looks like, it's not that scary. How would you prepare for them for that in terms of what they're looking at and how that process works if they come and talk to you?
I agree with you about people being nervous. I think as lawyers, we seem to think that everyone does lawyer talk and we understand each other, but most of my clients have never even been in a lawyer's office. They've had no reason to be before a lawyer, so obviously they're nervous. They're also at their wits' end with their finances. The best thing I can tell people, and what I try to do, is we treat my reception areas like triage. We treat them as if they're in a hospital and they're going to see a doctor and we're going to take care of their problem. And most people who come in, they might be nervous on the front end, but after having a conversation with me or one of my staff attorneys, and we've laid out how things can be better for them, they usually walk away with a feeling of peace, and I think they sleep better that night. At least that's what most of my clients tell me. The best way they can prepare is to make the call. If you don't make the call, you don't get the answers that you need. And one of the things I tell people all the time is knowledge is power. And if you don't know the answer, come see us. We do it for free. We offer a consult for free. We'll talk to you and tell you what your options are. And sometimes the option isn't bankruptcy. Sometimes there's another option. Sometimes there's no option and we'll find, they have to do something else. But just get the answers to your questions and see somebody, and don't be nervous about seeing an attorney because we're really nice people.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. I have people all the time that they'll call and they'll ask me about a situation, and I'll explain their options, and a lot of times it's that they don't have any options, there's not anything that we can do for them, it's not a fit, and they'll apologize. And I think to myself, don't apologize. It was free.
Right.
It didn't hurt you at all, and in the future, if something comes up, feel free to call me. I'm always here, and if I don't know the answer, if it's something that someone like you is an expert in, we'll get them to you, and so it just doesn't hurt across the board when it comes to aspects of legal questions. That's to just ask.
That's why the legal representation is so important. And Gina, at the top of the show, I mentioned that the number of bankruptcy filings in Alabama were twice the national average. Any idea why that's so?
We've been running first and second for a very long time, and it is based on per capita. So California has the most bankruptcies, but it's per capita. So I don't really know. A lot of the debt that people have in Alabama, it's medical debt. I think 66% of the bankruptcies are people are pushed into bankruptcy because of medical debt. So I guess my go-to answer would be medical debt overall. People have gotten hurt, had a heart attack, can't work, and they don't have good insurance coverage because they can't afford insurance coverage, and they've got hospitals chasing after them for money, and they have to file bankruptcy because of medical debt.
All right, certainly. Final thought, Michael, on bankruptcy that we need to legal representation, right?
Well, and I would just echo what she said, that if you're in a situation where you even think, or you're being hounded by a creditor, or you're not getting your full paycheck, and regardless of what kind of earner you are, talk to someone who knows that's an expert, because it's very, very complicated and it's very, very important.
All right, Gina McDonald, thank you so much for being with us. We certainly appreciate it. We also thank you for joining us here on The Attorneys as we tackle this subject of bankruptcy, how to handle it. Make sure you join us next week, same place, same channel. We'll do it again.
Thanks for watching The Attorneys, sponsored by Hollis Wright.